trouble.
Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person. Yosemite's one of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Mike Lindell's a conspiracy.
Well, you haven't. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. They said nobody gets it in order. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Amazing.
He can't sit down. He's got a burning in his butthole. He's got a fire. He's got a flame coming out of his butthole.
Big, massive dumps.
Oh, I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism.
Somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing.
You see, this is a simple meme that you would find on the internet, but this meme is very real.
You ain't seen nothing yet until you see the flaming butthole.
Putting us on our knees to China.
Tallywhacker.
Found the nation. Waldorf Nation. What's up, everybody? We've made it! We've survived! It's Friday! Yes, finally the end of the week. And boy, has it been a long week. Full of lots and lots of news, most of it bad, some of it actually kind of good, and the rest a little fun. So now, we're going to have some fun, like I just mentioned. We have MAGA Chuds getting tackled by police. That's funny because, and by the way, normally, like, obviously I'm against police brutality. There was no brutality in this case. It's just somebody being incredibly obnoxious and getting flattened as a result. So I'm gonna show you that video. This is gonna be a lot of fun. And so I think you'll enjoy that. Marjorie Taylor Greene votes in favor of Russian oil. Ooh, interesting. Very interesting. Wow. Then we have some worker wins at Starbucks. That's a fun story. Disastrous story. We're going to talk about how Texas, landlords in Texas, and of course across the United States, have been taking advantage of rent relief programs and kicking out tenants. Now, this is something that, of course, we've talked about. We know that this is a thing that has been happening, but we have documented stories of this now. We have people that have told their story to the Texas Tribune. Really, really disastrous. We're going to go through and we're going to talk about it. But of course, we're going to start out the day with Republicans getting caught doing fraud. I swear, I need to make a bumper for the segment because it keeps happening. It keeps happening. We keep finding the fraud. We're finding fraud. We're finding it everywhere. I know. I'm surprised too. I mean, Republicans doing fraud? No, you're kidding me.
Oh no!
How could this happen? How could this ever happen? Republicans being caught doing fraud. Oh, right. It's because they're doing a lot of fraud. So, you even have I notice a lot of you using the frog, voter frog. That's pretty good. Whenever I bring up this story. So, I don't know. Maybe there needs to be like an emote for this. I don't know. That means I would actually have to do some work. So I'll just leave you with this.
I don't like them putting chemicals in the water that turn the friggin' frogs gay.
I'm just saying.
Disappointed!
All right. So it's one of those days. I'm hopped up on caffeine. Let's do it. Let's go with the find the fraud. Here be the fraud. The conspiracy of mass voter fraud in the election of 2020 continues to be spread like a zombie virus, essentially. That it is the zombie, it will not die. The conspiracy that never ends. Or you could also say the grift that never ends, because Republicans continue to spread this lie about mass voter fraud. And now, while mass voter fraud does not actually exist, it's not a real thing, there is voter fraud, and it does happen. In fact, another story, and I've been covering this pretty extensively because we've been finding, isolated incidences of people who are, obviously doing fraudulent voting twice, registering the wrong address that they don't actually live at, things like that. In fact, an Indiana city council member, this is somebody in power this time, he has been arrested and charged with 2 counts of voting outside their precinct and 1 count each of theft, perjury, and official misconduct. Interesting. Very interesting. So now, again, this is according to Wish TV, which, by the way, awesome. Wish TV. Now, there are 2 lies, as I mentioned, that are told quite frequently in conservative circles. That mass voter fraud is rampant, again, because it's mass, and that it's exclusively perpetuated by Democrats. Well, once again, we see in this case, none of those things hold up. Shocker. In fact, you have Brian Young, a Republican on the Pulaski County Council, who listed his address back in 2004 for his voter registration. So now that address is in his district, in the district that he represents. So you would think, okay, there's no problem there, right? However, apparently they got tipped off, the police did, that Young didn't actually live there, didn't actually live in that district or in that address. In fact, they suspected that Young had actually lived at a different residence outside of his district with his girlfriend and their daughter, with the residence listed on his voter registration being where his parents live. Interesting. Now, Young claimed, when this was pointed out in court documents, no, I sometimes stay with my girlfriend and our daughter because she's got MS, multiple sclerosis, and, that's okay because I told people already about it, and they said it was fine. It was fine that I live with my parents because that's the address. So wait, he's living with his parents and not his girlfriend who has MS. Wouldn't you think that she would need him to stay all the time for care? Why would you stay somewhere else? Why would you be living somewhere else? Do you not want to spend time with your girlfriend and your child? Is it so difficult for you to be around your disabled girlfriend? That sounds very, very shady. What's going on here? Now, so he said, and this is where the lying comes in, right? The perjury. He said, claimed that he told the Republican county chairman, the current Pulaski County clerk, and the previous county clerk about his living situation, and that they all agreed that he was clear to run for a seat represented District 3. So now he's running, again, he was running for office, and he was living in a different place and voting from a place that was not on his registration forms. Interesting. Now, it turns out that the president and most past Republican county chairman and the current county clerk denied telling Young that he was clear to run, court papers say, And of course, the present county clerk's predecessor is dead. So you can't really go and ask him. Police ultimately determined that Young does not live at that address on his voter registration, and instead lives outside of the district that he is supposed to represent. So he didn't even live there. And use that address to vote in multiple primary and general elections outside of the precinct where he resided. That, my friends, is a crime. Oops. Now, he was booked into the Pulaski County Jail on Tuesday and was released, unfortunately, after posting bond. But look, that's the situation. Okay. Oh, we have voter fraud. We have people lying on documents, lying to the court, saying, no, I have permission to live in this place and to lie about my voter registration. That's fine. To which they say, no, that's not fine. You're obviously lying. You're obviously making things up. And you're obviously doing voter fraud. Now, he's already been arrested. Is he going to get a lengthy jail time? Very unlikely, as we've seen with different voter fraud cases involving white Republicans. White Republicans, slap on the wrist. Oh, bad boy, you shouldn't have done that. Or, of course, if it happens to black people, and it does happen on occasion, well, and by the way, when it does happen to black people, oftentimes it's usually people that are on supervised release, parole, and they're told that they're able to vote. So they go and they try to exercise their vote. And it turns out, oh, oops, you made a mistake. You're going to go to prison now. For sometimes up to years in prison, where, as I have mentioned, some of these white Republicans that are caught doing willful in-person voter fraud, sometimes impersonating other people, making up stories about their dead wife, and doing all these things, their dead parents, voting in their name, oftentimes for Republicans, for Donald Trump. What happens to them? Nothing. A little bit of probation. And that's about it. So, And yet, why is it that you keep finding white Republicans getting busted for doing this voter fraud? When they claim that it's the other side that's doing it, well, we know it's projection. It's always projection when it comes to the Republican Party. They bring up the specter of voter fraud because they themselves engage in it. And he's not the only one who has been alleged to have done so. I believe it was Mark Meadows who says, oh, I registered at a trailer that I don't even live at and may have never even visited. Under investigation. And there are other investigations as well. And there are other people that have been arrested. Again, all white Republicans. And yet they never really get in trouble. Not that much anyway. And they're the ones that are systematically attempting to roll back voting rights for African Americans and for Democrats and for students. And it's because they know that if they do not roll back those rights, they will not win elections. Because there just aren't enough of them. So they do that. They gerrymander the districts. They ensure that black people have to wait in line to vote for very, very long periods of time. And so it's all an effort, a systematic effort to erase the vote by blaming the people, by projecting onto other people what they themselves have always been engaged in. Fraud. Because that's what they are. Fraud. Absolute frauds. Speaking of fraud, let's go to Marjorie Taylor Greene. You're gonna love this story. And just an aside, I always find it funny when people accidentally call Marjorie Taylor Greene Marjorie Tater Greene or Margarine Tater Greene. So good. It's funny because it's like some people do it and not even realize that they're doing it. It's the best. All right. Anyway, let's go to oil. Yeah. On Thursday, the U.S. House of Representatives passed a bill to suspend trade with Russia, as well as ban the importation of Russian oil. So now this bill actually follows the Senate passing the measure 100-0. So understand, in the House it got 418 votes and 100-0 in the Senate. Overwhelmingly bipartisan. And essentially, of course, it's to punish Russia for their invasion into Ukraine. So now, there were House Republicans that decided to vote against this bill for what they say are varying reasons, but I think I'm going to speculate into what I believe the reasons are, at least for Marjorie Taylor Greene. In fact, you had Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Andy Biggs, Paul Gosar, Warren Davidson, Scott Perry, Matt Gaetz, Thomas Massie, and Thomas Massie. And so those Republicans were like, no, we would still like to do trade with Russia, and we would still like to do importation of Russian oil. Interesting. So now, Gaetz and Massie and Greene specifically cited the Maginski Act as the reason they pushed against this bill. In fact, the Maginski Act, if you're not familiar, is a law that empowers the federal government to sanction entities deemed to be violating human rights. In fact, it was used against certain Russian oligarchs before. In fact, there was a discussion about this all the way back in 2016, where some Russian lobbyists were coming through and speaking to Trump Tower, the infamous Trump Tower meeting, about why they should remove the Maginski Act, because there are certain Russian oligarchs that had been sanctioned by that over their role in doing some pretty bad things. Let's just say that. There were naughty boys and girls over there in Russia supporting some very bad things. Now, that said, here's what Marjorie Taylor Greene had said. I'm sorry, this is what Massie had said in a statement to Insider. Quote, extending the already overly broad executive powers in the Maginski Act forever is legislative malpractice. You know what legislative malpractice actually is? It's basically taking a piece of legislation that is immensely popular with the American people and would be good for the American people, like Build Back Better, and tanking it, not passing it. Taking something that is incredibly helpful, popular with the American people, and not doing it. That's legislative malpractice, okay? And Republicans and corporate Democrats, by the way, engage in that all the time. Now, both Greene and Gaetz explained their votes on Twitter. In fact, here's what Matt Gaetz said. President Biden should not have a blank check to sanction whoever he deems a human rights violator. Really? Well, that means, by the way, if Biden gets that power, well, then the next president will also have that power. So, do you think about that at all? Because if that happens, and by the way, that is kind of the problem sometimes, where you have these executive powers that are given to the president and are never given back. And when a Republican administration takes over, oftentimes they abuse that power. And so, look, that's actually a legitimate concern, not from Matt Gaetz, but overall, when you give more executive power. That said, I do believe that in the spirit of the law, you have the Russians that are engaging, and I should say the Russian military that is engaging in war crimes, in human rights abuses. And I think that is important to point out. Now, the bill, which still passed with 418 votes, as I mentioned, will empower the State Department to collect evidence and begin investigating allegations of Russian war crimes in Ukraine. Now, Green, however, claimed that HR 7276 would hand over authority to our intelligence and would hand over authority and our intelligence to the ICJ and ICC, the international courts. Now, why would you be against that? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene says that it would put our military on trial. Quote, I will not vote for globalism and the slow slide to become a one-world government. I will only vote to protect America, our military, and our borders. Also,
Nancy Pelosi's gazpacho police.
Yeah, she's not in favor of that, though. Not at all. So what does that mean, essentially? Well, okay. Basically, it means that she's totally fine with Russia not being held accountable for war crimes. But it also means that she's fine with the United States not being held accountable for war crimes. And I think this is very important. And I think this is very relevant as well. Because you think the International Criminal Court hasn't pointed out that the United States has also committed some war crimes? So if you're actually, if somehow this bill, which is set to become law, President Biden's going to sign it, if they inadvertently give the ICC power to go after US's war crimes, I think that's a good thing. I think that our military should be held accountable for any war crimes or potential war crimes that we may commit into the future, as well as things that happened in the past. I think that's great. If they inadvertently did that without thinking about it, you know what? All the better. All the better. That said, we have done war crimes, and let me give you some examples, right? The collateral murder video in Iraq. That was leaked by whistleblower Chelsea Manning, where, yes, our own chopper pilots targeted and killed civilians, including first responders and journalists. So that's very important, okay? Now, just in general terms, we also have enhanced interrogation, of which the international community has considered to be, again, war crimes, torture, extraordinary renditions, the numerous massacres that the United States had done in places like Vietnam, Korea, etc. And so, look, if the ICC wants to take the military to task over that and actually do some accountability, I'm all for it. Wonderful. Hey, congratulations, Congress. You might have actually done something, maybe unintentionally, fantastic. But at the same time, right, you also have Russia. So now Russia has been credibly accused of war crimes during its invasion of Ukraine. And so understand that that's generally the main thing that they're trying to address here in this bill. And so the sanctions against oil and against Russian oligarchs make sense. It makes a ton of sense. And by the way, banning the importation of Russian oil, that actually also, at least if you're coming at it from the conservative talking point side, right? Well, wouldn't that, by extension, help domestic oil production? Is Marjorie Taylor Greene voting against American energy and voting to import more Russian oil? Now, of course, I say that from the conservative side because we know in reality there's no such thing as American energy. There's no such thing as energy independence, right? At least when it comes to fossil fuels. Now, energy independence when it comes to solar, nuclear, wind, all that, geothermal, etc. Yes, those are ways that we can be energy independent away from fossil fuels, away from Saudi Arabia, Russia, all these other oil-producing countries, like in the global south, for example. So now, that said, the reason I say no energy independence with fossil fuels is because oil companies and gas companies are multinational. They owe no allegiance to any company. None at all. And so they take that oil, they take it out of our ground, and they go and they sell it in the world market. Now, what Joe Biden can do is that he could restrict export of oil produced here. Now, he's not going to do that because that would impact oil company profits, and we can't have that. Now, on that, do you ever see any Republicans saying the same thing? Do you ever see them saying, oh, we should restrict our oil exports, to other countries and keep the energy, keep the oil companies from selling to other countries, right? So that we can lower the gas prices here. No, you don't see that. You don't see that at all. Now, either Marjorie Taylor Greene on this issue, and in just like many other issues, is deeply unintelligent, or she is corrupt. I mean, it could be both, really. But let's go to the corruption angle, right? Because I think this is really interesting. So now, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I've talked about this before. Do you remember when she purchased defense contractor stock right before calling out war profiteering? Literally engaging in war profiteering and then complaining about war profiteering? She purchased between $1,001 and $15,000 in Lockheed Martin stock on February 22nd, 2022. A day later, she said this, quote, war and rumors of war is incredibly profitable and convenient. Yes, you would know. And just like that, the media now has a lie to use as the reason for our shattered economy and out-of-control inflation. What a sad existence must be to shill for globalism and America last, politicians. Now, again, that was right after, that was a day after she bought defense contractor stock, in 2 days before Russia launched her invasion of Ukraine. And since then, by the way, speaking of that stock in Lockheed Martin, guess what? The Biden administration has sent billions of dollars to Ukraine so that the Ukrainians can turn around and spend that money on what? Weapon systems. Not weapon systems that they need to defend themselves, obviously. So now they're turning around, and guess what they're doing? They are purchasing weapons like Lockheed Martin's Javelin missile systems. The sales of that and the stock related to giving all this money to Ukraine to turn around and buy these weapons, what does that do to the stock price? Makes it go up. It makes Marjorie Taylor Greene richer. It's almost as if she's a, wait for it, war profiteer. Huh. Now, what's interesting here, getting back to the oil, and the oil that she is totally fine with importing from Russia. You realize that oil is actually one of the things, since, again, Russia is a petrol state, that is keeping the Russian economy afloat. Amid all of these different punishing sanctions, oil sales are keeping the Russian economy going so that they can continue this war in Ukraine. Now, if we ban the oil sales, which we should have done a long time ago, but I'm glad we're actually trying to do it now, well, that's going to hurt Russia. That's going to hurt the Russian economy, and hopefully that's going to convince Putin to pull back and end this disastrous war and actually come to a peace agreement with the Ukrainians. Again, we want peace to happen, and these economic tools are the ways in which we could pressure them into doing so. Now, that would be nice, right? However, Marjorie Taylor Greene will end the defense industry, by the way, overall. Well, what would happen if there were a peace agreement? If we stopped needing to give money to Ukraine to turn around and buy these weapons? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene and everybody else invested would start losing money. They wouldn't make any more money, would they? And maybe that's all there is to it. Maybe. Somehow, I'm not entirely sure. Again, there are Republicans who are all about the money and corporate Democrats as well, and they just look out for their investments. But I think with Marjorie Taylor Greene, it's a little bit different. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene literally really does want the United States to be a lot more like Russia. Run by an authoritarian, backed by oligarchs, and the Christian church, where gay people are heavily oppressed, trans people are oppressed, the media is run by the state on behalf of just Vladimir Putin, and their political opponents die under mysterious circumstances. I don't know. It seems like it. green goes Iron Gates, definitely. And I'm sure many others would also like to live under that system, so long as Trump or someone like him were in charge of it. Or I guess as long as they're in charge of it. Fascism, understand, is one of the trademarks of being in the modern far right. All right. Moving on. Go to some fun. A Pennsylvania man was arrested and charged with several different charges, including resisting arrest, after he allegedly put some anti-Biden stickers on a gas pump and decided to fight with police when they asked him to stop. Here's video of that incident. Take a look.
Bring your other hand around. You gotta get a lawyer for this. Jesus Christ.
Wow. Okay then. So obviously the first thing was he took off. Gone. Gone. And the cop decided, no, I'm gonna tackle him. Oh, okay. Again, what did you think was gonna happen, dude? Seriously. Now look, the man arrested here is Thomas Richard Glazewski, right? So now look, Mr. Glazewski, I know I butchered his name. Well, apparently this man is very angry at gas. Okay, I totally understand that. I get it. I think we're all pretty angry at gas prices. Sure. Now, he's blaming Joe Biden, which is fascinating. He literally does not control the price of gas. Now, he was yelling at the police officer. He said, I did that. That's what I did. And then he pointed at the stickers. Let me give you an example of the sticker. Let's see. Yeah, that's not the exact sticker that he put on, but okay. Oh, okay, ha, right? Oh, look at my sticker. Now, he also, according to a gas station employee who complained about this, Glazewski, who was 54, sprayed the stickers with a substance that would make it more difficult to remove. Oh, okay. Now, look, obviously that's vandalism. You really shouldn't do that. That's not a good idea. And look, people have been putting these stickers on gas pumps following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Now, what's interesting about that, getting back to the point of how it's not the president that sets gas prices, companies have been using this, the war with Ukraine, in order to basically gouge people at the pump. And so understandably, people are very, very angry, right? Now, it's got everything to do, however, with corporate greed, very little to do with Ukraine. In fact, we've only imported about, a very small amount of oil from Russia, about 8% in total. And so limiting that, it's not really a big deal. It shouldn't affect the oil markets the ways that it was. Okay. That said, Fox News, conservative media, they want to blame Joe Biden for gas prices, despite again having no control over that. And obviously, the companies are engaging in greed, just massive greed. And by the way, the Keystone XL pipeline, that would not help the situation. In fact, what the Keystone XL pipeline would do is just essentially carry oil drilled from Canada, and in this case, tar sands, which is incredibly dirty and very, very prone to leakage, right? From Canada, ship it to Texas to be refined and sold on the world market. This would not produce any additional oil. It's just a pipeline. So it really wouldn't do anything here. All right? But now, facts don't matter to people, especially those who are brainwashed by conservative media, and they think that vandalizing gas pumps with dumb stickers is awesome. That doesn't mean the police officer should have been doing, like, brutality. But here's the thing. You shouldn't be fighting with cops over that. When they tell you to stop vandalizing something, it's like, okay, sorry. Now, if they had if the police had continued to attack him and arrest him after he had stopped, like they asked him to stop and he decided, okay, I'll stop. Sorry about that. I'll remove the sticker now and then leave. We wouldn't have had a problem. But in this case, no, the guy kept going and he became very combative. In fact, I have more video here of resistance. Here's more of that when they tried to get him in the car.
Be on video. Guy bashed my head. Just slam me in here. Let's see some blood, man. Let's see some blood. I should bash my head in your door. Go ahead, crack the door.
So, look, understand that I'm a huge critic of police brutality, right? In this case, though, this guy wants to be brutalized. It is this weird thing that conservatives do. They want to be victimized really, really badly. And so they'll do things like this. In a way, for them to be, quote unquote, victimized, so they can complain about it. That's what it is. Again, the whole video screams, "Abuse me, daddy," so that I can go back and I can complain about how the big bad government is coming after me. I can't wait to be a victim. Please brutalize me. Do the police brutality to me so that I can cry about the government that is abusing me. No, in this case, look, I didn't see any brutality. Honestly, it did look like he was resisting arrest. That's what it seems like. And understand how I come to this conclusion. For one, they didn't beat the shit out of him. No obvious injuries. There was no pepper spray involved. They didn't tase or shoot him. They didn't do any lasting damage. I'm pretty sure the tackle probably hurt. But again, from all the different police brutality videos that I've seen, this doesn't even come close to being actual brutality. And so, I mean, look, that's what I get from this video. Chud being a chud. And again, a lot of you could point out correctly that, well, there's a reason, of course. He's white. He's white. He's old. And so, probably, obviously, you're a Republican, a right-winger. And so, yes, they handle him with I guess, the best that they could in that situation. For a black person doing something similar, it might be a lot different. But it didn't. It didn't turn out that way. And so, good on them for that. And this guy, again, being an obvious pain in the ass and doing ridiculous things. Sir, again, it's not Biden doing gas prices, and there's no reason for you to be vandalizing a pump. If anything, you should be mad at the oil companies, at the gas companies. That's what it should be. And so that's who I'm mad at, and that's who all of us should be angry at. Okay. Moving on here. Let's go to some good news. Handled them with kids clubs. Yeah, generally, yeah. I mean, it seemed pretty, normal. Which is why I didn't have too much of a problem with it, honestly. Good news. The resurgence of labor in America continues. Unions have begun to rack up several more wins, this time against Starbucks. Now, Starbucks, of course, famous union-busting firm. Yet, here we have some more victories. In fact, on Thursday, 3 upstate New York Starbucks stores, 2 in Rochester and 1 in Buffalo, had voted to unionize. In Rochester, workers at a new Starbucks in the Whole Foods Plaza on Monroe Avenue voted 10-3 for a union, while the tally was 13-11 at the company's Mount Hope location. Meanwhile, in Buffalo, the vote was 18-1 in favor of forming a union at the downtown Starbucks in the corner of Delaware and Chippewa, making that location the 6th local branch of the coffee chain to unionize, according to Spectrum News. Rochester organizer Haley Fagan said in a statement, quote, "We are overjoyed. This is what it's all about. Partners truly becoming partners. Throughout this process, there has been nothing I've come to appreciate more than every partner standing next to me, every partner so courageously advocating for themselves." So she refers to partners, by the way. There's this weird thing at some jobs where your partners, associates, family members, even in some cases. I kid you not. But generally, the more endearing of a term they tend to use, the less likely they treat you like that. I'm just saying. So, but in this case, a union partner, well, again, partners standing with partners to form a union, I think that's the best thing that we can see. All right, so now, this follows other victories at other companies. For example, Amazon created a union in one of its warehouses. That's fantastic. And it also follows union victories and strikes in places across the country. In fact, many of these strikes, like at John Deere, Kellogg's, you've right now concrete workers in Seattle that are currently on strike. Many of these strikes, many of these union actions have netted significant concessions from the company. Companies that have seen, their profit margins in the billions of dollars. Now, these have netted significant bumps in pay and benefits for these workers, better working conditions. I think that's fantastic. And understand that that's what people are asking for. Now, these unionization pushes have led Starbucks to bring back union buster Howard Schultz for the 3rd time as the CEO. In fact, here's what he said recently about the unionization efforts all over the country.
Here's where it gets a little sensitive, because I've been coached a little bit, but I do want to talk about something pretty serious. We can't ignore what is happening in the country as it relates to companies throughout the country being assaulted in many ways by the threat of unionization.
You probably should have been coached a little bit better than that. He just comes out and says it. They're being assaulted by the threat of a labor union. Oh my God. By people who actually want to have good pay and benefits. That's an assault on you. That's an assault. I mean, that's insane. Almost as insane as trying to placate people with NFTs. And here's the thing, right? So even if the company, by the way, decides to do good pay and benefits without a union, it's still better to have a union. Why? Again, you have the solidarity. You have workers that are working together with the company to bring up any potential issues in the future, worker protections. Any issues would have to be addressed by management when they pop up. And besides, a unionized workforce, any good company could also help the company. Represented workers that are happy are productive workers. There's less turnover, less need to train new people for those positions, more opportunities for growth, because they're not just focused on the short term, they're focused on the long term. So that actually keeps costs lower than a place that has terrible employee churn. Okay? So now, in fact, overall, it sets up your business for long-term success, which is a good thing. It's supposed to be a good thing. I know it's anathema to the big corporations right now, constantly seeking short-term gains. But again, it's good for the economy at large. Again, the labor union, the labor movement itself is a positive thing. It built the middle class in this country. It made people, regular people, actually be able to buy things, to afford things, to live good lives. We need that in this country more than ever. But of course, after union busting, decades and decades of union busting, skyrocketing corporate profits, and going in the absolute wrong direction when it comes to workers' rights, thankfully, we now have labor coming back. And I know there's a long way to go for labor. They're still incredibly underrepresented in the workforce overall. However, every little victory like this, as we've seen, continues to add and add and add. And now, hopefully, it will get to a point to where it snowballs and we have a real worker awakening in this country. I can't wait for it. It's coming. Okay. So let's get to the rent story. Prepare to be enraged. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, millions of Americans who lost their jobs, or were laid off, or there were closures at their jobs, well, as a result of not getting enough money, they began to fall behind on their rent. Now, in response, Congress decided to pass $1.9 trillion in stimulus. Now, again, the vast majority of it went to corporations, and even the thing that was supposed to help the renters, well, that went to, well, these big companies as well. Now, this rent relief went to landlords in order to try to keep struggling tenants in their homes. Now, all over the country, unfortunately, as I've talked about before, landlords wouldn't, well, I mean, they would take the money, but they would decide to kick out their tenants anyway. Now, here's an example. Some of this happened in Texas, but again, there are stories from all over the country of the same thing. But here's what the Texas Tribune reports. In fact, they talked about Katy resident Cherie Scott, who was kicked out of their house. She received a notice last September that she, her husband, and their 4 kids would soon be kicked out of their Katy apartment. She said employees at the complex told her not to worry about it. Well, that's interesting. So she brought up this issue. Hey, look, I got an eviction letter. What should I do with this? I can't afford it. You know, obviously we've fallen behind. It's the pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not working, and I'll get to that in a minute. What do we do? They said, don't worry about it. Totally fine. $1.9 trillion in stimulus. We'll be all right. Okay. Now, a little bit more about their situation. Scott and her husband had fallen behind on rent in June after Scott stopped working in order to take care of their youngest daughter. Their youngest daughter has Down syndrome, and of course, with that, medical bills. So obviously that's very important. The next month, their landlord started the eviction process, even though Scott had taken the rental office's staff advice and requested help from Texas' $2 billion in federally backed rental assistance. So that was a fund given by the federal government. Now, when the state, now they were approved for this, okay, approved, and the money was actually sent. However, it went to the wrong address. Okay. Now, before that, Scott said that she spoke to the office staff and walked away believing that she didn't need to worry about the eviction because she had applied for and was approved for that relief money. And so they also said they advised her not to show up to eviction court proceedings. Now, as I mentioned, the state sent the relief check to the wrong address, but Scott said that the staff had assured her that they were working to get the money resent. So they knew it was on the way. They knew it. Scott said, quote, "I trusted them," but then added, "I guess I shouldn't have." Now, again, the situation. She said there was a problem. She went to the staff. The staff said, "Don't worry about it. You've applied. We know the money is on its way. It's coming. We know we're going to get paid. So, of course, we're not going to evict you." And then what happened? She was evicted. In fact, Scott had landed a new job. So she did have a job as a dietitian at a local hospital when she returned from work one afternoon in early October to find her belongings spread out across the lawn and the locks changed. They moved everything out while she was at work. Now, of course, the other thing that happened, because this is a double whammy, right? Not only did they get evicted, but their electronics that were moved out onto the lawn were stolen by thieves. She was at work. Her family wasn't there. They couldn't do anything. So now it turns out that Jeff Williams, the Harris County Justice of the Peace, had approved the eviction because Scott was not present in court. Because she was advised to not go to court by the staff of the very company that evicted her. Again, they knew the money was coming. They still took her to court. They said, "Don't worry about it." Evicted her by surprise, gone. And she was robbed in 2 different ways. Actually, no, 3 different ways. Because guess what? Landlord got their money. And they cashed a check and they kept the money. After weeks of phone calls, a Texas rent relief program staffer told Scott that her former landlord had indeed received the rent money in mid-November in a total of more than $11,000, enough to cover the 6 months of back rent that they had owed. Scott said, quote, "They were very well informed that the money was there and it was coming to them," said Scott, who is now living in a short-term rental in Missouri City for their 4 children. Yet, quote, "They pushed us out." Scott's former landlord, Blazer Real Estate Services, a Houston property management company, did not respond to calls and emails requesting comment. An employee at Blazer's office who answered the phone declined to answer any questions because, of course. More stories. And it's very similar, by the way. 2 other landlords, like Scott's, also evicted their tenants in the period between the initial rent relief application, when they knew it was coming, and when the government money arrived. And kept it. Now that, of course, is fraud. You can't do that. If you evict somebody for back rent, you can't just keep the money under the program. Now, of course, there are ways that you could probably go after the previous landlord, whether it be through suing for back rent and things like that, to try to recoup your money. But they just took that government money that was designed to have them allow these people to stay in their homes, kicked them out, kept the money anyway. Again, that is a violation of the program's requirements And in those cases, the check was initially sent to the wrong property and then only arrived after the tenant was kicked out. One landlord received federal money through the Texas Rent Relief Program and later chose not to renew the tenant's lease, although that happens to be legal. I'll tell you that story, give you the details on that. In order to receive federal rent relief funds through the state, landlords had to sign an agreement that forbids them from evicting tenants for non-payment during the time period covered by that assistance. But as you can see here, none of them honored that agreement. Well, okay, let's go back. None of the ones that I mentioned honored this agreement. There are others, of course, that have, but there are plenty that didn't. And yet, here's the thing. In this case, they hold all the power, these landlords do. Look, somebody who's poor and in need of this government relief money, when they get screwed over, what do you think that they can do? What's their recourse? Well, they don't have one. They don't have the money to hire a lawyer. They don't have the money to sue for wrongful eviction, especially when you look at the fact that they did owe back rent. But they were approved for money to help pay that back rent. But it didn't matter. It didn't matter. Now, there's more. This problem, as I mentioned, happens all over the country. In fact, according to the National Housing Law Project, 86% of the 119 lawyers across the country who responded to a survey gauging how the end of the federal moratorium on evictions was affecting tenants said that they had seen cases where landlords either declined to apply for assistance from rent relief programs or took their money and proceeded to kick out tenants. That program, again, is supposed to bar landlords from accepting rent relief payments after they evict a tenant. Stuart Campbell, managing attorney at Dallas Eviction Advocacy Center, speaking generally about instances in which landlords received their rent but evicted the tenants, said this, quote, "The program is the industry standard here is fraud. These landlords are the prime beneficiary of these rental assistance programs and are just en masse have been violating these provisions of the program, and on top of that, consistently lying to judges, misleading them, and securing judgments and evictions even when they're receiving the funds." Now you would think obvious fraud is obvious. Wouldn't the government do something about this? Shouldn't they? Again, this is misappropriation of the funds and against the law, right? Well, it turns out that a collection of state and federal agencies, including something called the TDHCA, are tasked with looking into allegations of fraud, waste, and abuse in rent relief programs. This happens to be in Texas. Now, none of the agencies, however, contacted by the Tribune would say whether any landlord has been credibly accused of taking rent relief money and improperly ousting their tenants, or whether they have imposed penalties on landlords for doing so. So look, maybe they're like, we're not going to comment on this. Or maybe they're just like, we haven't had anything. We're not going to tell you. Or maybe we just haven't had any. Maybe we're just not investigating at all. Maybe we're funded by the real estate industry. Maybe we're funded by these people. I don't know. I don't know the situation. Now, let me give you more information here. In fact, some tenants who spoke to the Tribune about their cases said that they had called a hotline used to report fraud, waste, and abuse in the state rent relief program, but never heard back about their complaints. Oh, you see, they misunderstood what that was about. You see, that waste, fraud, and abuse hotline, that's not to report landlords. No. That entire thing was designed to report regular people, to report renters. That's what that was about. Because they're assumed to have been doing all the fraud. The poor people, the renters, who are trying to stay in their homes, in their apartments. Oh, of course those people are fraud because they need government money. But instead, they get inundated with calls about, hey, my landlord just stole all this money and kicked me out. Oh, well, we're not really designed for that. Sorry, not really our job. No, we're supposed to come after you, not the landlords. In fact, here's another example here. Stephanie Gates, who was evicted in January after applying for rent relief at the property manager's urging. The property owner then cashed the check after she had been kicked out in March. Stephanie Gates, once again, her rental assistance check went to the wrong address and reached her landlord less than 2 weeks after she was evicted from her Round Rock home in January. They took, that former landlord, again, took the money. And they're not supposed to. Now, landlords who received rent relief dollars cannot evict their tenants for any reason related to rent or fees during the time covered by the funds, according to the program requirements. But those are the exact grounds that Gates' landlord company, the RDRH Holdings, cited when it sued to evict her. According to the program rules laid out by the agreement Gates' landlord signed on July 13th to receive the funding, if a landlord receives rent relief money after evicting the tenant, they're supposed to send the money back to TDHCA within 10 days. As of February 17th, Gates' former landlord had not done so. Gates, for her, basically she told the Tribune, quote, "I was a good tenant. You know, we just had the problems from the pandemic last year, which everybody did. Taking advantage of normal people to get federal money. Because of course." Oh, but the next story. One more here. This is Diana Johnson, 35 years old. She was waiting on rent relief in January when her landlord tried to evict her and her 7 children from their 3-bedroom apartment. Johnson, a manager of a hair salon and certified nursing assistant, had asked the program in October for help covering rent while she recovered from giving birth to her son and was unable to work. Texas Rent Relief approved her for a little over $3,100, or about 3 months worth of rent. Johnson's landlord, a partnership owned by Mark Musemensch, a Houston developer, had already accepted more than $4,200 in federal money in August to pay 4 months of rent, according to a copy of Johnson's rent ledger she provided the Tribune. So he had already accepted federal money from her. And so, yeah, no problem, right? No problem. Now, Johnson then caught COVID-19 afterwards, as many people have. She ended up missing a month of work as a result. Johnson had asked the office manager whether they had received the latest check. They told her that there was no way to check if they had received it. However, the morning of her March 18th eviction hearing, a Texas Rent Relief staffer told Johnson that her landlord had actually cashed the check 2 days earlier. Remember, she goes in to say, "Did you get the check?" They said, "I don't know. We can't really see that. We don't know if we got the check." And turns out 2 days prior to that, they had already cashed it. And they even had the check number available. That was a recorded call by Johnson's lawyer. Now, when Dallas County Justice of the Peace Juan Yasso had heard about the check and the phone call, he asked the property manager whether they had received the check. Johnson said the property manager quickly confirmed that they had, and Yasso had tossed out the eviction. So in this case, you would think, wait, how is this worse? This is a win. She won. No, that same day, her landlord decided, we took the money and we got the money and you won. We improperly kicked you out. But now we're just going to decide not to renew your lease. That lease expires the following week. That right there is obvious cruelty. How dare you fight against me after I stole your money and tried to kick you out? How dare you win against our efforts to try to steal your money and kick you out? Or in this case, steal taxpayer money and then kick you out. we're just going to not renew your lease then. That's totally legal for us because we want you out anyway. You had the temerity to fight against me. Gone. Get out. And by the way, when we get out, and I can't confirm this, but what do you want to bet? How much do you want to bet that landlord turned around and raised the price on that apartment? You want to bet? You want to bet it was a decent amount of above a rent hike? I wouldn't be shocked. Look, honestly, this is something that we knew was happening. I mean, again, we had called it during the pandemic, right after the rent relief. There's going to be landlords that are going to take advantage of this. They're going to kick people out. They're going to steal the money. And they're going to raise the rents afterwards. We knew it, and this is his confirmation. And the reason they can do it is because they can. We have turned housing into a commodity. Shelter is a human right. Housing is a human right. Everyone has a right to have a safe place to sleep, to rest. But of course, in the United States, we don't believe that. I mean, we've commodified everything. Shelter, obviously a commodity. Food, commodity. Healthcare, oh, you betcha. We're going to commodify the shit out of it. And we, and we being the capital class, because remember, workers are not capitalists. The people with the capital are the capitalists. You're just a serf. You're a worker. Never forget that. The capitalists are going to take and take and take as much as they can, while the same companies buy up real estate and drive up the prices of the market by creating an artificial scarcity that they can then exploit by charging sky-high rents. Again, people who pay rent either cannot afford to buy a home or they're not able to be approved by banks for home loans that'll only give to a certain kind of person. The irony, of course, is that mortgages oftentimes are way more affordable than renting. And so the result of this, of course, is the situation where you have a lot of people who are very precariously living from hotel to, Airbnb, or living out of their cars, or just staying in places where maybe, you have a fixed time, a short time to rent, short-term housing, all of that stuff. And that's happening to the most vulnerable people. And this is the result of pure, unadulterated cruelty and greed. Housing is a systemic issue. And it requires a systemic approach to solve that issue. This was a Band-Aid, obviously, in this program. Did it help people? Of course. And that's good, but it didn't solve the problem. That problem being greed. That problem being the scarcity of affordable housing in this country. And so we need to fix that systemic issue so that stuff like this doesn't happen and regular people do not get hurt or screwed or taken advantage of by this disgusting, broken system. Okay. Well, yeah. Let's go to some super chats. All right. Hold on here. Let me pull that up. Dango Bango, very kind today. A lot of super chats. You an official, or was it a weapons dealer got sentenced to life for doing not safe for work stuff with minors? Another arms dealer got permabanned on Twitter. Interesting. It's not isolated cases. Remember, Trump ordered his followers to commit voter fraud, he said during a debate when he tried to get Biden with COVID. Well, look, again, I say isolated cases because we have to be careful in not adding into the myth that there is a mass voter fraud. All these cases, yes, they don't add up to any statistical, I guess, advantage for any candidate in any election. Not enough votes to decide an election. Let's be honest with that. So I just wanted to make sure that was very clear on that, and pointing out that, yes, there's a handful of cases. Remember, voter fraud, 0.00001%, or some, number like that, infinitesimally small in the grand scheme of things. There's not mass voter fraud. There is fraud. These fraud cases were only committed thanks to Trump ordering his followers to commit it. It's very important, too, to point out that, yes, Trump did tell his people to vote twice. And that is fair. That is true. All right. Reminder that MTG is a neo-Nazi. Yep. Landlords have been caught using social media like Reddit and Facebook to coordinate attacks on tenants. Oh, yeah. I've seen those threads as well. In capitalism, there are no rights, only commodities. Again, if they can commodify it, they can make money from it, they will do so. Madi Darno says, peace and love to all. Spring is here. Take care of yourselves and each other. Thanks for the show. Well, thank you for watching. Really, really appreciate it. The ones who got caught were Republicans. Yes, absolutely. And just because there is fraud ravaging Wolverine ads, it does not amount to calling for overturning of elections. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Okay. Damn. I realized that was a pretty heavy story, but it was something that that needed to be discussed. So, okay. Mr. Green must control his property. Yeah. Man. I didn't say that. I didn't say women were property. Marjorie Taylor Greene said women were the property of men and were the weaker sex. So that's her opinion, not mine. All right. Let's see. Yeah, my view counter is off. Weird. Oh, Flaco Wessos, thank you for resubbing for a month at Tier 1 over on Twitch. Finally got to see the show live this week. Keep being awesome. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Really, really appreciate that. Okay. Looks like that's all we have today. Thank you all. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday, hopefully. And I mean that by saying, hopefully you're here, because we'll be here, barring any unforeseen circumstances. And not to get super cryptic with you, but we'll be here on Monday, so we'll see you then. All right, you have a good weekend. We'll love you all. Love you all. We'll see you back here on Monday. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you later.
Big, massive dump.
I have not looked this conversation.
Wet ass keyword. There's some whores in this house.
Sexual anarchy.
Tentacles.
Get in a long tube with a bunch of bees. They're kicking me out the door. They're kicking me out the door.